Good morning. Thank you all for joining us, and welcome to our first board meeting of 2023. I'd like to now call the meeting to order. Our first meeting of the year is always in February, the month in which we formally recognize an important and undeniable aspect of our nation's history, Black history, spanning from the first slave ship landed in Virginia to the Civil Rights era and current events. The history includes a lengthy roster of inventors, civic leaders, and many firsts of their kind. Last month, Maryland marked a Black History first of its kind with the inauguration of Maryland's first Black governor, Governor Wes Moore. Like many of you, I was delighted to be there in person on that wonderful and historic day. We look forward to working with the Moore administration. And as you know, with the new administration, this board also has two new ex officio members. Kevin Addix, who joins the board as Secretary of Agriculture, is no stranger to higher education, having served on the University of Maryland College of Agriculture's Global Leadership Council. He is the founder of Grow and Fortify, an organization that supports value-added architecture. Kevin could not be with us in person today. And we also have a new Secretary of Commerce, Kevin Anderson, who is founder and CEO of Cardinal Atlantic Holdings, an economic and community development firm. He also has experience in government, having worked in the administration of D.C. Mayor Anthony Williams. Regent Anderson could also not be here today. With this transition, I want to thank Regent Bartenfelter and the former Secretary of Agriculture, and Regent Mike Gill, the former Secretary of Commerce, for their service on the board. Continuing with welcomes, I'd like to welcome Dr. Melanie Perrault. Will you raise your hand? To her first board meeting as Towson's interim president, and Dr. Allison Wynn, the new Senior Vice Chancellor for Academic and Student Affairs. Will you please stand up? To her first board meeting. We look forward to working with you both. With Dr. Wynn's welcome, we must now say, don't be a stranger, but never goodbye to Vice Chancellor Bachman. Save your Kleenex, though, as more will be said about Dr. Bachman later in the agenda. Let me now take a moment to acknowledge the USM leaders included in the Daily Record's Power 100 list for 2022-23. Presidents Valerie Shears Ashby, President Bruce Gerald, President Darrell Pines, and President Kim Satchel were all recognized, as was our Chancellor, Jay Perman. This is a wonderful demonstration of the contributions and reach of the university system. Congratulations to you all. Turning to our agenda, we will first hear from the Universities of Shady Grove Executive Director, the tenacious and Academian, following and will be our education forum as we look at anchor institutions across the USM, spotlighting Frostburg State University. Leading the forum will be Vice Chancellor of Research and Economic Development, Michelle Masucci. After the forum, we will, of course, hear from Chancellor Perman. And so, Anne, will you come up? Yes, and take the podium.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Chair Gooden, Regents, Chancellor Perman, Presidents, and to all of our guests, welcome to the Universities at Shady Grove. It is such an honor to host you all today, and I'm delighted to have a few minutes of your time to share some of what's happening here at the Universities at Shady Grove. USG, which was founded by the University System of Maryland in the year 2000, is the largest of the 3 regional higher education centers within the system. We serve more than 3,000 students a year through nearly 80 academic programs offered by our outstanding 9 partner universities. Fall 2022 enrollment has been down from our previous year. In 2021, we were at 3,600 students. This past fall, we were at 3,100. So we have some work to do to grow that enrollment. It breaks down to about 1,900 undergraduate students and just over 1,200 graduate programs. Like our fellow RHECs in Hagerstown and Southern Maryland, our undergraduate programs are specifically designed for students who transfer into the programs offered by our university partners at USG, either with an associate's degree or 60 credits from another institution. Since we were founded, more than 15,000 students, undergraduate and graduate combined, have earned their degrees or certificates from our partner universities. Like I like to say, 9 universities, 1 campus, great results. Many of our students are first in their families to go to college. They have work and family obligations while they are taking on the responsibility to finance their education. Going to a residential 4-year campus, as we often think of the traditional student in higher education, is just not in the cards for many of these students. In fact, some 74% of all students in higher education today, including community colleges, now fit the description of a non-traditional student. These are the students attending programs at USG. I know some of you have been here before, but for anyone who has not, I hope you will take even a quick tour through our spectacular biomedical sciences and engineering building that you and the state of Maryland have built to serve the students in our community with cutting-edge STEM programs. And we are also excited about the renovation taking place in Building 1 for the expansion of the University of Maryland Baltimore School of Nursing. USG has enjoyed a lot of success, but in many ways we have been operating as a startup organization. When I started in this role in late 2020, one big priority was and is the development and implementation of our first strategic plan to help guide us into the future. I was incredibly fortunate to have as my co-chair in leading that effort your fellow regent, Ike Leggett. He also, of course, served as our former county executive and was involved with USG since its inception. Regent Leggett, thank you once again for all of your wisdom and your leadership. With the help of USG and the greater community, we worked hard over an entire year to create that strategic plan to guide us for the next 10 years. And we are working hard now to develop the capacity and structure to implement the plan. It's a shared vision we simply entitle USG 2.0. At the heart of USG 2.0 is what we call the promise. That is, holding ourselves accountable for ensuring students not only succeed academically, but that they emerge upon completion of their studies fully ready to secure meaningful employment and have great careers. One of the ways we will do this is by continuing to build successful academic pathways from public school to community colleges to programs at USG that lead students into these great careers. At the heart of this pathway building effort in USG is an innovative approach to collaboration between our academic partners and employers in the region. We are working closely with our university partners and our local educational partners from Montgomery County Public Schools and Montgomery College and other regional community colleges. And now, through the changes we are implementing, we will more inclusively work with employers across 4 key industry sectors to ensure pathway programs align with economic opportunities and students graduate career ready. Our Board of Advisors is a strategically important partner in this effort and has taken innovative steps to reorganize and align with this work. My thanks to Kevin Beverly, our board chair, and all of our Board of Advisor members for their support and their great work in this effort. One example of this kind of pathway program that has served students in Montgomery County for over the past 10 years is ACES, Achieving Collegiate Excellence and Success. In just a few minutes, you will hear from a recent graduate who is indeed a true ACES success story. But the main reason I mention pathway programs and employer partnerships is that today we have exciting news, which we shared with you last night, about a partnership we have forged with none other than Google. We are thrilled to announce that Google has provided USG with a $500,000 gift to identify, measure, assess, and learn what works best in building pathways for students. and ultimately to share findings with institutions throughout the system and throughout the nation to encourage modeling and scaling successful pathway efforts. We are so grateful to Google for the confidence they have shown in USG to pioneer this initiative to advance life-changing pathway programs for the students of today and the workforce of tomorrow. I especially want to thank Dr. Shanika Hope, Director of Google's Education for Social Impact team, who many of you had the good fortune to meet at last night's dinner. With our academic partners, we are building powerful partnerships with business and industry to help our academic planning and programming and the work we do to prepare students to be career ready. USG is and always has been an innovative model of higher education delivery, and like our fellow RHECs, is an asset for the University System of Maryland. As the system sets a bold and beautiful course with Vision 2030, we see USG 2.0 as deeply aligned with the work ahead and an important resource for achieving the student-centered vision. Indeed, we have a unique opportunity to specifically serve as a place for shared innovation and collaboration within the university system, a place to develop, measure, and test, model, and scale pathways, academic programming and delivery that meets our students where they are throughout their lifelong educational and career journeys and meets the workforce needs of the county, the region, and the state. On a shared regional campus such as ours, we see USG as a place where university partners can work together, informed by data, to develop and pilot new programs and initiatives on one shared campus. We believe that USG can and should be designed.
We're getting a lot of feedback.
How's that? Is that better? Okay.
Well, I don't think it's you.
Test, test, test. Okay.
Yes.
Right. We believe that USG can and should be designated as a hub of innovation to best serve students and the needs of our regional workforce within the university system. I do want you to know that we are moving boldly into the future under this new plan, and that we are extremely grateful to the Regents and Chancellor Perman for your support. Thanks again to Regent Leggett, to Chair Gooden, to Regent Ganella, and to all of you who have played a role in helping us shape USG 2.0 and letting us be part of shaping and being part of shaping Vision 2030 as well. And at this time, I want you to hear from an alumna of College Park's Robert H. Smith School of Business as a student on the USG campus. She is a prime example of the kind of outstanding, career-ready graduate who emerges when we build pathways for students to educational and career success. Please welcome for a few words Audrey Owasam, who will briefly share her experience coming through the pathway that led her to completing her studies at USG. Audrey?
Thank you so much, and hello everyone. My name is Audrey Owasam, and it is such a delight to be here on this morning to share just how impactful the universities at Shady Grove has been to my life, and particularly the ACES program. And so first, I want to start by sharing a story. And it's a story of a young man from a farming village in Mancon, Cameroon. Now everyone's looking a bit weird. Where's Mancon, Cameroon? It's a West African country, and it's right near Nigeria. You can't miss it. And so this young man's curiosity and ambition for education, they were ignited when reading Booker T. Washington's story in his autobiography, Up From Slavery. And with a great desire to learn more, this young man wrote a letter to the Tuskegee Institute. And of course, it was amidst criticism, skepticism from his peers, and to the amazement of all, he got a letter back from the Tuskegee Institute. Now imagine this, set the setting, right? A small village in Mancon, Cameroon, received a letter from a university in the United States. And so this letter opened the door of possibilities for this young man and his family. And so why am I sharing this story? Well, number one, because it's Black History Month, and number two, because this young man was my father. And I believe his story beautifully illustrates just how much education can positively change the trajectory of one's life and create opportunities for growth and success. And so in the same way that Booker T. Washington's book changed my father's life, the ACES program has been a life-changing experience for me. And so as a student at the program, I was given a clear pathway and actionable steps on how to achieve academic success and build a sustainable career. So the program provided me with coaches, career advisors at every stage in my journey, from MCPS, go Seneca, right, to MC, go the Raptors, and of course, UMD at USG, go Terps, right? And so it was thanks to these partnerships with these institutions, plus the scholarships provided, that I was also able to transition seamlessly, and this is the good part, I was able to graduate debt-free. Can we give a round for that? Yes. And so with the support of this program, I was also able to start a 501c3 nonprofit organization called Noble Uprising. And to date, we have been able to partner with various community organizations and deliver over 10,000 food, hygiene, household items to women who are experiencing domestic violence, in addition to women experiencing poverty and homelessness. And so as you can see, the impact of this program, it extends far beyond just my story and my success. I'm just one of the many students and alumni with the program who have gone on to become leaders, to become entrepreneurs and change makers in our society that create value in our community and contribute to shaping our future world. And so the ACES program has transformed lives. It's opened doors of opportunity that once seemed impossible to many. And so it's on behalf, and it's really an honor of mine, on behalf of the students, the alumni, that I want to say thank you. Thank you for providing this opportunity of this program. Thank you for this gift of a program. And of course, as Anne has mentioned, this promise that will last a lifetime and impact generations to come. Thank you.
Isn't this the best job in the world? The absolute best job in the world. Thank you, Audrey. And finally, I want to invite a member of our USG Board of Advisors to briefly share with you the importance of our regional center in helping to build a diverse, vibrant workforce for our community, and especially for the rapidly growing STEM and life sciences industry that are driving the economy of our region and our future health and well-being of our world. Please welcome Fernanda Aldernaz, Executive Global Product Leader for Oncology R&D for AstraZeneca PLC.
Thank you, Anne. I hope you are all inspired enough. So that's just a snippet of what our students can do. So on that note, I'm honored to be here today. I joined the Board of Advisors a little short of 2 years ago as a physician, a scientist, a mom, and quite frankly, a citizen. I believe in the power of higher education, how transformational it can be, and how deeply it's able to change the life trajectory of an individual, a family, or a whole community. A lot has changed in the past couple of years, and the workplace keeps evolving by the minute. The USG Board of Advisors held a Future Action Symposium focused on STEM last year, with key stakeholders across disciplines and sectors, including, of course, Dr. Hope. A few themes have emerged in the community. Talent acquisition in many disciplines, included but not limited to STEM, has become challenging. We need to empower women, minorities, and other underrepresented groups to achieve the level of career readiness required to maintain and grow a vibrant and thriving workforce. One could argue that this is an effort based on fundamentally altruism and social justice. It's not. While those are highly valued, don't get me wrong, we are in clear need of matching open positions with job seekers. So it's actually a pragmatic approach. As Anne mentioned, the traditional student living on campus, pursuing a four-year college degree with various financial strategies to afford it, is giving more and more room to the non-traditional student. So what does this look like? Students that might be slightly older, supporting a family, commuting, pursuing shorter and more flexible pathways. This transformation to a new normal is happening. The universities at Shady Grove and the University System of Maryland are in a unique position to address the needs of the students and the workforce in a win-win fashion, making higher education accessible without, and I cannot emphasize this enough, without compromising on quality, seeking excellence. Having a workforce that is fully inclusive with access to alternative pathways, including, as we heard, timely mentorship and sponsorship, it's not a nice to have anymore. It's a need to have, a must have. So we, all of us, have in our hands the chance of giving momentum to this transformation, starting by the region, followed by the state, and ultimately setting a model that could be implemented by various institutions across the country. We are all here today with a sense of possibility, urgency, and service, and I am confident we can make it happen. Thank you all for listening to these few words today, and back to you, Anne.
Again, thank you so much for your time this morning. Thank you so much to all the Regents for joining us here today. It's an honor to host you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Kademian, and thank you for the inspiring presentations this morning. You certainly have reminded us why we do what we do.
Thank you. I didn't know if I needed to take questions or if that's...
Well, you can.
Okay.
Does anyone have any questions for Anne this morning? Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll now turn to our educational forum, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Masucci.
Good morning. Let's see, I have to test my technology here for a second. Okay, we're in good shape. Good morning. Thank you, everyone. It's wonderful to be here. I want to acknowledge Chair Gooden, Chancellor Perman, our university presidents, colleagues, students, members of the audience, both here in the room and virtually. It's really a great opportunity to get to talk about anchor institutions and really to think about and conceptualize the system as a whole, as an anchor system. I especially want to recognize Frostburg State University President Ron Nowacek, who's going to join me a little bit later, and we're going to talk about Frostburg State as a case study. And he and his team have been invaluable in helping me to pull together something what I hope will be informative about Frostburg as I scratch the surface and learn what is happening across the state. I'm going to start us off today by talking about some of the recent reports that are highlighting the importance of anchor institutions as a way to kind of bring us into this conversation and be in the same conversation about what anchors are. First, there's a report called Innovation Districts, which was a Brookings report released in 2014, which began a shift in thinking about anchor institutions from being research compounds to a more integrated and cross-cutting confluence of actors and assets. It introduced the concept of a district for innovation that extends beyond the notion of a single driver of economic development. This notion that we need to create an ecosystem of interactive supports that connect the dots between physical, economic, networking assets has become the blueprint for more contemporary thinking about anchor institutions and even anchor systems. There's a subsequent 2018 National Academies report, which is not highlighted here, Communities in Action. It's a Pathways to Health Equity report that pointed to the importance of zip codes and being where you live as a key to health care that you receive, where those who are connected to anchor institutions receive better health care benefits and care, and raises the importance of how health equity is an important driver of community well-being, and kind of connects the dots between education, transportation, housing, employment, social environments that families may find themselves in, the physical environment, and health systems and services as one whole sort of anchor loop that helps communities do well. The report highlighted here further it develops that idea of anchor institutions being a combination of eds and meds, and introducing that the idea you don't have one size that fits all, communities differ, right? So there's a sort of evolving conversation here. And this report in particular highlights that you need to have different kinds of partners. It really brings in the idea that HBCUs need to be critical in anchor institution connections, and that universities are always kind of at the core, so you get the theme here. Finally, more recently, there's a Brookings report that's come out that highlights the importance of the new investments in Build Back Better. And so there's a renewed interest in anchors because of all of the federal dollars that are flowing into the anchor environment. There are also some organizations that are becoming very established to help us measure the impacts of anchor institutions, including UIDP, which is a spinoff of the National Academies. And it is one that connects universities and industries to track innovation. Another is APLU, which has a new designation of Innovation and Economic Prosperity Universities. And so there's a recognition among publics about where publics are standing out in this process. And I thought this might be of interest for you. The Fed has created an interactive tool to actually measure the impact of anchor investments around the country. So the link, the very last slide that you see, is a clickable link that you can actually go in and fill in information about a region and find out just how much economic productivity is happening there. So there's a very important focus that's happening right now on how to measure the impact, and I think we as universities really need to be understanding how that functions for us. Traditionally, anchors have been considered to be local and place-based with a focus on services, workforce, and housing. They're sector-specific, as I've mentioned, education, healthcare, and industries. They're centers for human capital and knowledge. That should be no surprise to anybody in this room. And they drive economic development, primarily through the land development, infrastructure, and core facilities. More contemporary focuses on anchor institutions are that non-urban settings are equally important to urban settings, that there's a convergence of different types of institutions that are performing the function of anchors, that there's a growing importance on facilities and infrastructure, that there's a deep community focus, which you'll see in many of the examples that we look at. Importantly, as a geographer, there's a deeper geography context that's at work in anchors, meaning that they're not just about the single place where they're located, but as you'll see in Frostburg, they really extend to a broader region and impact. And finally, that metrics matter. And I really want to emphasize that when we think about the important role of our institutions, of course we think about metrics like enrollment, we think about the revenue that is coming into institutions, but we also need to be looking at the impact that they're making in their local economies. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about anchor institutions in the system. As a geographer, we always need to bring a map to the table. So I'll share with you that this is some of the educational institutions themselves and branches around the system, so you can kind of get an idea of what's located where. If you add another layer, these are the research parks in addition to the universities that are university-connected research parks. There are many other research parks that are not university-connected, but I limited myself to those. This includes all of the extension offices around the state, and so I think it's really important for us to always remember that in addition to educational activities that go on, there's this whole other agricultural extension network that happens through the state, led by the University of Maryland Eastern Shore and the University of Maryland College Park. And finally, I wanted to just kind of bring you into kind of the corridors. So you can see the I-95 corridor that connects from sort of the northeast down to Washington, D.C. There's a Route 50 corridor that connects through the Eastern Shore, and then there's the I-68 corridor, which we'll talk in a little while about, that connects the Western Maryland community with Frostburg sitting right at the center of that, and really as the sole institution that's driving the role and importance of anchors out there. So we've already pointed to the fact that UMES and College Park are managing the agricultural extension service. I think that's something we should focus on in time. UMES also has launched the Sarbanes Center for Ecological Research, putting a research foothold in Worcester County. The University of Baltimore is home to the City Scholars Program that supports Baltimore city government employees to be able to get their education and to get financial aid to support that. University of Maryland Global College, Global Campus extends the geography and the modality of being able to access education. And then I have a few other examples that I've shared. There's a recent headline at Coppin about the new broadband investment that was received to improve community connectedness. BW Tech is a research park out at UMBC that has a government incubator located within the tech park. There's an Institute for Restorative Justice and Practices at Bowie. My alma mater has launched the Eastern Shore GIS Cooperative, which does mapping for social good. There's a hatchery. There are actually two hatcheries on the Eastern Shore. One is at Salisbury, which is about economic development, and the other is at Umseys, which actually does a lot of bay restoration and repopulates the oysters in the bay. And of course, my very first visit as I was doing my rounds around the system was to the Armory at Towson University, where there's a startup home. And just another example, a prominent example that you've probably heard about, is the University of Maryland Strategic Partnership Empowering the State, where there was a coming together of the University of Maryland Baltimore, the University of Maryland Baltimore County, College Park, the University of Maryland Medical System, and Montgomery County, to advance really a whole new sector, not just anchoring an institution, but to launch biomedical innovation at the scale of the sector. So those are just a few of the ways in which the system itself is actually driving economic development through its anchors. We're going to turn our attention to Frostburg. I had the pleasure to meet with lots of the folks out at Frostburg about what great activities that they're doing. And I just wanted to kind of share with you this idea that there's a whole ecosystem of programs that are happening to really focus on community success at a very local scale. And these are highlighting workforce development, which is a really important component of the work being done at Frostburg. And just to give you an idea of how innovative and how important that work is, you know, part of their research park is actually creating a home for remote workers who are located in Frostburg, but actually connected to economic systems all around the country as they connect with sort of the new wave of employment, which is that you don't have to be located where you work. So what they're trying to do is to anchor some of those remote workers to the Frostburg area. There's a business and company launch program. There are lots of community partnerships that we can talk about. There's a big effort on developing Main Street and really making sure that Main Street and the university are working together to define not only the types of activities that are on Main Street, but the quality of those activities and the connectedness to student learning. There's a huge technical assistance program. And Ron, I'm going to have you talk a little bit about the planetarium and the convening activities that are going on.
Yeah, I just want to mention, I was mentioning to Michelle before we started, I think in rural settings, the importance of an institution is to be the convener, the honest broker, to bring different groups together so that they can have discussions. We don't have basically a dog in the fight as to what industry is the one that's successful. We want successful industries, successful companies. So we have the ability, I think, of having the trust, and it's important that you, I think, build the trust at institutions for the local employers, the economic developers, the local officials, that they feel confident that there's somebody they can turn to that will help lead and convene, listen, and then have the resources in many cases. As you know, for going after grant money, many companies and things or organizations just don't have the ability to do that. They can count on a university to help with the resources there. But as I was mentioning to Michelle, I think in rural institutions especially, the convening part is really a critical part. They're looking to the university to provide that ability to lead and convene and bring those people together. So I think, I appreciate that, but I think that, to my way of thinking, that has been our major focus early on. And once you have that built in, you then have the ability to start actually making some changes and helping move things forward and presenting things in a different way that I think we'll get to in a few minutes.
Thank you. You may not know this, but Frostburg is home to one of 2 small business development centers in the state. The College Park has the other. And this serves Allegheny, Garrett, and Washington counties. What small business development centers do all across the country with funding from EDA is to actually support small businesses in getting started. They actually provide technical assistance on everything from hiring practices to tax forms to incorporation forms. And without small business development centers, so many institutions just would never get off of the ground because they don't have the wherewithal to navigate the maze of regulations and requirements to get launched. So through the SBDC, there's a whole network of companies and actors out in Western Maryland that are connected to the university. In addition, there are, and it supports their regional goals of innovation, investment, incubation, and information gathering to support a sort of technical understanding of the needs of those companies. There's a regional science center initiative, which we'll talk about in a little bit more detail in a moment, but there's plans to create a science center right on Main Street in Frostburg, where there's a rehabilitation of City Hall that will become the new home for a Challenger Connected Center. The Small Business Development Center runs something called the Legacy Business Program, in which businesses that are located in Western Maryland who are owned by, a sole proprietor and haven't been able to pass that on to the next generation, actually market those businesses and try to find individuals to come in from other parts of the country to relocate to Western Maryland and keep those businesses alive. It's a tremendously important program for helping preserve the quality and characteristics of small town living and to keep establishments. You know how it is. You go and get your cup of coffee at the place that you've been going for the last 20 years. Somebody decides to retire, then what happens? The place goes away, and you really lose that sense of community connectedness that's created by the continuity of that business in that community. And so a part of this program seeks to disrupt that cycle by bringing in outside capital. It's a tremendously successful program. And we'll also talk a little bit more about how Western Maryland is trying to position itself economically as a destination for recreation manufacturing, and how Frostburg State is actually building that out in its own academic programming. There is an alliance that Frostburg established with the Greater Cumberland Committee called the I-68 Regional Alliance. There's a little inset map on the side to show you just how far west it is, and that it actually includes counties from Maryland, Western Pennsylvania, and West Virginia, Eastern West Virginia. And so they work together to actually pursue economic development goals and achieve those for the region, obviously with universities at the center. But you can see if you look, I don't know if you can read all the logos, but it's chambers of commerce at the state level, at the local level, of course, and universities that are all working together. The industry sectors that are the focus of the alliance are aerospace and defense, information technology, and lifestyle manufacturing. And finally, there's a really critical need in Western Maryland for housing to support all of the folks that live there and retain them so that the housing stock improves, and of course workforce support. I don't know, Ron, if you want to add anything, since this is This is your baby.
The I-68 Regional Alliance was an interesting concept because we took a while to come up with a name, quite frankly, and then we had to bring people together because, as you know, when you'll come out to Western Maryland in June, you'll be on I-68, look across the road, when you're going through Cumberland, you'll see the Potomac River. Yes, it starts out in Western Maryland. You'll see West Virginia, where you're just minutes from West Virginia. Bringing the groups together has been a help for us because we now have 6 senators, U.S. senators, working on projects for us because of the different states, and multiple congressmen that have come together and, quite frankly, across the aisle, working to help in Western Maryland. So the I-68 Regional Alliance came about and really resonated with the individuals there. So we have pulled together, and we'll talk, I guess, maybe a little bit more about the recreational side of things. But Western Maryland has more, with the whole area out there, the I-68 Regional Alliance has more parks and recreational areas than some states do in terms of the amount of territory that's been devoted for recreation and parks. And those of you who have visited Deep Creek, you know what I'm talking about and knowing the area that's out there. So it was clearly taking advantage of, and this is where, again, as the conveners, we brought people together from those counties that never were working together to talk about where we see opportunities, what are the assets we have, help lead that discussion, and did it in a focused, meaningful way so that we were able to come up with some focused areas, including this area of recreation. The housing is an interesting one because I just got a statistic the other day. In Allegheny County, the median house in the area was built in 1939. So there is not a lot of housing for young professionals, and there's certainly a need for it, and we're seeing that. You may have seen aerospace defense in, say, Western Maryland. There's a large Northrop Grumman plant in West Virginia that is hiring right now 500 engineers over the next 5 years because of growth in the things they're doing. So those young engineers are coming, looking and saying, where can I live? They're not interested in rehabbing a house that was built in the 1920s. So we've got our work cut out for us, but we know what the work is. We know what it is, and quite frankly, I think it's a tribute to the work of the university coming up with that. I do want to mention before we move on too that, just to let you know, this was not funded on the backs of student tuition. When I was hired and I was asked to do economic development and really work there, we went to Governor Hogan and said, if you want us to do it, we can't do it on the backs of tuition. And so he and the state legislature appropriated over $500,000 for us to start an Office of Regional Development and Engagement. And that's partnered now into us getting ARC grants of over $1 million, other money coming in. So it's the return on the dollar has been what I think the state was hoping for.
Frostburg State University is in the process of establishing a regional science center in affiliation with the Challenger Learning Center. The Challenger Learning Center is a national coalition of science centers, from money that came from donations around the Challenger accident. And it kind of builds out the Air Force, the aerospace industry focus that's happening in Western Maryland from an industry standpoint. But I want to just kind of show you the wraparound way in which this is working, right? It's that the old City Hall is being rehabilitated as a home base for the center, that it's providing STEM engagement and STEM self-efficacy, STEM career experiences for students. It's bringing them into 21st century skills, and what better way to do it than through aerospace, because who doesn't love, the idea of space travel, and especially if you're a kid, it's a really engaging focus. Just this year alone, there was $1.25 million in state and federal funding to support it, and I think, Ron, you were saying $4.5 million overall to support the Science Center initiative.
Yeah, we received another $3 million from the governor early on from the state. So all of this has been funded either with state and federal funding or funding from private donations from fundraising out in Western Maryland. We think it's make a difference. The other thing from my perspective quickly is, remember Frostburg was founded as a teaching institution, so science education fits. We're not going outside our original mission, and it really helps, and it really has helped with our faculty to understand this is bringing today students to campus or to downtown Frostburg, 6th to 8th graders, to understand and help them with science education, which we know we need throughout the country. So it's a great way for us to continue our legacy as an education founded as a school for teachers.
And the last example I wanted to share with you about the way in which Frostburg is leading as an anchor is the way in which they're building out the recreation sector. And again, you can see from the photograph and the little images that have been peppered throughout the presentation how scenically beautiful the area is, how much parkland there is. Many of you have probably visited the area and understand that that's a draw. And so the idea is to position Frostburg State as a destination for learning experiences and knowledge creation related to that sector. There's also, not only is there an outdoor lifestyle as a basis for enjoyment, but there's actually a burgeoning lifestyle manufacturing focus. And I mean, by lifestyle manufacturing, I mean actually manufacturing products like kayaks and tents and things that kind of match the local area. There's an effort to retain the workforce that does live in Frostburg, and I will say that I heard this over and over again all day long when I was out in Frostburg, Ron, that people who work at Frostburg have lived in Frostburg their whole lives, 20, 30 years, 20 with the university. They stay because they love the location. They like the quality of life, the community ties that they have, the memory and the roots. And so, retaining a workforce in light of the lack of opportunities that can sometimes exist in rural areas is one of the key reasons why this particular sector is so important. Finally, they're trying, as we noted before, to focus on housing and other kinds of services as a way to keep that workforce going. And with Frostburg State as a hub, together with USM Hagerstown, building out educational opportunities in those areas of the workforce where they're lacking personnel, like teachers, think healthcare workers. And so all of that is sort of what the institution is driving. And the reason I wanted to really kind of help you understand anchors from a more rural perspective is that many of us who are, especially if we're in that I-95 corridor, many of you know I spent much of my career in the middle of a very large city and dealt with anchor institutions in terms of the immediate community connections that happen. Here, you're talking about a disaggregated, geographically dispersed population and a different set of challenges in terms of outreach. And I think it's remarkable what Frostburg has been able to do. Just as a way to conclude, there's some best practices. Obviously the role of convening and coordinating organizational partners is right at the center of what Frostburg has been doing, leading coalitions, bringing parties together. They're deeply focused on concentrating opportunities and growth in Western Maryland, so it's not just about training our students to be able to have education foundations and workers, but also anchoring them to the location where many of them are from. Catalyzing opportunities for new programs. And I think it's really important to understand that anchor institutions are living and breathing. It's the programs that actually make the institutions work. And of course, creating student learning experiences through engagement across this entire complex ecosystem that's been developed. So I wanted to leave you with those thoughts and open up the conversation to any questions or comments that you may have as we contemplate our important role in the system in anchoring change and growth for our citizens.
Chancellor, and then Hugh, and then Bill.
Well, I didn't mean to grab the mic as the first speaker, but I would just like to set the table here a bit. Our system, at its core, yes, focuses on education, and we're very proud of that. We meet and exceed our responsibilities in educating the citizens of Maryland. But I came back from my most recent visit to Frostburg, where I had the pleasure of spending the day with President Nowacek, and I said to myself, we need to remember that there is another significant role for our institutions that we actually play very well. And that's the genesis of what you've heard. I asked our chair to make room for us on the agenda to present this. We used Frostburg, as Michelle said, as a case study. we could tell an analogous story about each of our institutions. And I'd like the Regents to be proud of that. Thank you.
Hugh?
Yeah, I would just like to, I guess, a little bit echo the Chancellor's comments, and just as a former businessman and still living in Western Maryland, the importance of connecting the university with the business community. It takes leadership, and it's not an easy thing to achieve, to gain the trust of the community. And I think in both instances, Dr. Nwachik, I know the connectivity with Frostburg, the city, you've done some significant initiatives there, but also the I-68 Alliance. It's very difficult to get the constituencies across state lines to work on any projects. It's difficult within the state, but it's very difficult. There's a very parochial sense with the communities across the borders, and in fact across some of the geographic things like the Potomac River, and that's not an easy thing to do. And I think the same benefits for USMH campus. It's the same. The importance is there the same. I know we're going to soon name a new executive director there, but it's really important for them to understand the principles of that connectedness and how much of an impact our university can have on the workforce and the business community there. It's really vital. So I just commend you and your leadership for the kind of partnerships that you've been able to develop in Western Maryland.
Bill?
Thank you. I have a very narrowly focused question. There is a railroad line, I think it's a B&O railroad line, that goes from Washington to Hagerstown, perhaps, and I don't know if it goes as far as Frostburg, but does that railroad line have an impact on your campus? Is it a factor at all?
No. At this point, though, the railroad is not at this point a factor coming out. If it is, what we have coming out is just simply, we do have a train. The Amtrak actually runs through most of it through West Virginia. Okay. And comes up in West Virginia, does not go through the old B&O line at all. We're celebrating our 125th anniversary this year, and 125 years ago, there were 8 passenger trains that came through Cumberland every day. So it's a different world in terms of things. That,
does that need to come back?
I don't think so, not anytime soon. But I want to just follow up to one thing that the Chancellor said, and I think it's important for the Regents to know, we tout the university system of Maryland, because when we're talking to businesses, they look at Frostburg and say, well, we need help here or there, and we point out, we're part of the system. I can pick up the phone and get help at another institution for those individuals. So if they say, we need help in engineering, or we need help in a certain area, I said, we're part of the system, and we can connect you with people at other institutions. That goes a long way, because in many instances, companies locate because of the institution that may be close by, whatever. When they know they have talent from across the system, that makes a difference.
Jeff? Oh, your light's on.
Oh, unintentionally.
Okay. Oh, Ed?
Thank you. Ron, are you partnering with any higher education institutions in Pennsylvania and/or West Virginia?
We are working with WVU primarily from ARC money and the Appalachian Regional Commission. There are 3 counties in Maryland that qualify for Appalachian Regional Commission money, Garrett, Allegheny, and Washington. West Virginia University is leading an 8-state consortium right now. We're looking at the 9th state, looking at outdoor recreation as an economic driver, not as tourism, but what can you do in terms of economic driver. So we're working with WVU very closely. They've come out to us, as I remind the legislature when I testify, I have a flagship university less than an hour away. It happens to be in West Virginia. But it's one of those things we've been doing. So we've been finding ways of doing it, not so much with Pennsylvania, the state institutions there are not close. We are closer for many people. We're the closest 4-year school in Pennsylvania for a number of students that we're trying to attract than some of the other schools. But WVU has been our primary partner to this point. Thank you.
Any other questions or thoughts for Ron or Dr. Masucci? All right, hearing none. Thank you for that presentation. Extremely informative. Now, Chancellor Perman is going to give us the Chancellor's report.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everybody. Dr. Masucci, President Nowacek, thank you for reinforcing the importance of our institution, our institutions as anchors. As Chair Gooden noted, we come together during Black History Month, and I was proud to see 3 of our colleagues on the Baltimore Sun's list of 25 Black Marylanders to watch. You've seen this perhaps in the Sunday papers over the last several weeks. UMBC President Valerie Shears Ashby, Dr. Stacy Stevens from UMB's School of Social Work, and Ms. Lindsay Spahn, who is assistant coach for the women's basketball team at College Park. Many more on that same list, I need to point out, are USM alumni. And it's inspiring to me to see the Black excellence connected to our universities. I have some significant leadership news to mention. As you know, President Peter Goodwin has announced that he'll retire from UMCs at the end of the academic year. Dr. Goodwin's leadership of UMCs has been vitally important, locally, nationally, globally, guiding our approach to urgent environmental and climate challenges. This is not yet so long, but Peter, on behalf of everyone, I thank you for your service and for giving UMCs such an influential voice in environmental policy and practice. You will be missed.
Yes.
As the chair pointed out, earlier this month, Dr. Melanie Perot began her service as Towson University's interim president. As provost, she's been central to TU's scholarly excellence over the last 4 years, and we appreciate her willingness to take on this assignment. I would report to everybody that the search is launched under the leadership of Regent Fish, and we hope to have news in the coming months. As Chair Gooden also mentioned, Dr. Allison Wren joins us as Senior Vice Chancellor for Academic and Student Affairs. She has already contributed to our work and our perspective. When you come from the largest and most diverse university system in the country, as Dr. Wren has, namely the California State University system, you get experience. So I want to welcome you. Now, of course, yes, Dr. Wren's arrival means that we're saying goodbye to Senior Vice Chancellor Hoffman. I'm going to say a few words about Jo at the end of my remarks, fewer than I will at our send-off for her next week, and I hope to see many of you there. Let me start my comments related to our fine institutions with the one we're in, the universities at Shady Grove. I am always inspired when I hear Dr. Kademian talk about her vision for reimagining higher education. That's what this particular place is all about. It's a place that has and will build innovative new models that bring together the goals that we have: access, affordability, and equity. The fact that Google has put its imprimatur on this work is a huge endorsement of USG's big ideas and compelling leadership, and says all the time that regional centers like ours have an essential role to play in reshaping higher ed, in meaningfully connecting college to business and industry, in developing smart, efficient pathways that truly serve and support what we're now calling our fluid student. So I thank Dr. Kademian, as well as Dr. Abel and Dr. Wheel for their leadership of our regional centers. Moving across the system, I'll note that U.S. News and World Report has ranked the nation's best online degrees. 7 of our schools were recognized for 24 programs. Frostburg, Salisbury, Towson, Ubalde, UMBC made the list for programs in business, education, computer engineering, and more. UMB's School of Nursing has 4 top programs, including a pair of top 10s. And College Park got the nod in 9 degrees, including 3 MBA top 10s. Online degrees. In another ranking, closely watched National Science Foundation Research and Development Survey. This is where you add up the dollars. Research grants awarded. UMB and College Park, together as the University of Maryland, placed 10th among public universities nationally in research expenditures. That's a 3rd straight top 10 ranking. And it illustrates the power of collaboration, and there's more collaboration among our universities. TEDCO's Open Institute for Black Women Entrepreneurs has gotten federal support to work with our HBCUs, Bowie State, Coppin State, UMES, to develop entrepreneurial leaders, nurture their resilience in starting up businesses. The Dingman Center for Entrepreneurship at College Park Smith School is expanding its annual pitch competition, not just to include College Park, but to include BSU, Ubalde, and UMBC. Collaboration. And UMBC and UMB have partnered in a great oral history project, connecting neighbors in West Baltimore and bringing in visual and performing artists to interpret their stories. Thank you all for the collaboration. Let me move to individual and institutional excellence. Let me start with a truly notable honor. Among U.S. master's institutions, Salisbury University was just named the nation's number one producer of Fulbright students. SU led the field with 9 awards, and it's the 6th year in a row that it made the list of America's most prolific Fulbright schools. Congratulations, Lynn. And I need to point out, it wasn't the only USM school on the list. Towson tied for 8th nationally among master's institutions. So congratulations, President Perot. I've got more students that I need to talk about. It's the best thing to talk about. UMBC's Christopher Slaughter has won a Gates Cambridge Scholarship. I think these scholarships began, Valerie, in 2020 from the Gates Foundation to pursue a PhD in electrical engineering at the University of Cambridge. Why is this a singular honor? There are only 24 of these, 24, offered to U.S. students every year. So it's especially impressive that our student, Mr. Slaughter, is the 5th UMBC student to win the award. Congratulations, President Ashby. And Towson shares the spotlight again. Briseda Barrientos Ariza, a recent TU alumna, also won the Gates Cambridge Scholarship. The first student to do so in Towson's history. And Ms. Barrientos Ariza is a first-generation American first-generation college graduate who majored in English literature and psychology. At College Park, Kevin, too, has won a Churchill Scholarship, joining just 17 more STEM students nationwide. He's the 8th College Park student in the last half dozen years to be honored. And last Sunday, and I know many of you watched, America, President Broad was introduced to Justina Miles, perhaps the only person in the world who could steal the Super Bowl spotlight from Rihanna. And I'm singling out President Broad because Ms. Miles, yes, is a Bowie State nursing student. She's the first deaf woman to sign the Super Bowl halftime show, and she did it in style.
Very much so.
Broadway, Super Bowls, your students are on fire. I want to mention here that we had a run of inspiring graduation stories last winter that crystallized exactly, as Chair Gooden said, why we do what we do. You noted the mother-son duo, Carolyn and Emmanuel Patton, who graduated from UMGC together. 20 years after 5-year-old Emmanuel promised his mom they would. The identical twin brothers at Towson, Rasul and Malaki Wright, who shared twin 4.0 GPAs and a twin passion for service. And Pete Engel, a gentleman of 72 years of age, who earned his 3rd USM degree, a bachelor's degree in history from UMBC, which he added to his poli-sci degree from College Park, and a JD from Maryland Carey School at UMB. Talk about lifelong learning, commitment to it. So you can multiply these stories by the thousands. That's why, yeah, why we do what we do. Congratulations to all of these students and to all of our students. In faculty excellence, College Park has a lot to celebrate. Last week, maybe the week before, 3 Clark School faculty were elected to the National Academy of Engineering, bringing the university's total to 33 NAE members. And 7 faculty at College Park were named Fellows of the American Association for the Advancement of Science. And another singular honor, College Park faculty, a Bauer Award winner, went to Clark Distinguished Chair Deb Niemeyer. Dr. Niemeyer was honored by the Franklin Institute, very prestigious, for path-breaking research on transportation systems and climate impact, and how engineering design can advance or imperil public health and environmental equity. Dr. Eastman is here representing Dr. Pines today. Please convey our congratulations. Among our leaders, our presidents, Bowie State President Aminta Bro was named a Title IX Trailblazer by the CIAA, the Central Intercollegiate Athletic Association. And those of you who get Baltimore Magazine saw our distinguished colleague, Kurt Schmoke, president at UBalt, honored among the city's royalty. Royalty.
Just call me Sir Kurt.
You know, he keeps good company. The other royalty, John Waters, Joyce Scott, Barbara Mikulski, Carla Hayden, Brooks Robinson, the company. And they would say the same about you. They were called Baltimoreans who changed everything. So thank you, Kurt. I mean to congratulations. One quick alumnus story. Silver Spring teacher Dion Jones was honored with the Milken Family Foundation's Educator Award. I'm told these are the Oscars for classroom teachers, but they're even rarer than getting an Oscar. 32 teachers were honored nationwide, and I know Mr. Jones' alma mater, Coppin State, is very proud. So thank you, Provost. Grants and partnerships. UMB's School of Medicine is leading a $46 million DARPA project to develop stable artificial blood that can be used for transfusions at the point of injury. You can all imagine the critical importance of this discovery and development as a product. Obviously buys time for patients who would otherwise, frankly, exsanguinate. The project involves more than a dozen universities and biotech companies. Dr. Gerald, congratulations. And at UMB, the School of Medicine has launched Mind, a neuroscience institute intended to accelerate translational brain research by promoting collaboration between basic and clinical scientists. A $2 million NSF grant is going to launch Bowie State's Cyber Scholarship Program, growing and diversifying the pool of graduates who enter the federal cybersecurity workforce. And this is very exciting. BSU is part of a Howard University-led consortium collaborating on a university-affiliated research center. There are just 15 such centers in the nation, and this is the only one associated with the country's HBCUs. The DoD is funneling $90 million to this effort, focused on tactical autonomous systems. Earlier you heard Dr. Masucci mention Frostburg's Regional Science Center as a part of its anchor philosophy. Science Center just got $750,000 in federal funding to expand its space exploration simulations and its coding and robotics program. And the Department of Energy has awarded College Park $5 million to advance electric vehicle battery technology. College Park leads the nation in ARPA-E awards granted since the Department of Energy's inception. And UMES announced $1.5 million in federal support for its Entrepreneurship and Innovation Center, which helps small and minority businesses get off the ground. New language included in the HBCU RISE Act will mean millions of DoD dollars in addition, supporting UMES's pursuit of R1 status. So congratulations, President Anderson. Towson, one of 5 institutions collaborating on a $3 million NSF grant supporting science teacher education. TU's work is focused on simulations, helping pre-service teachers engage students in scientific argumentation. And at College Park, Center for International Development and Conflict Management is being supported with $4 million from USAID to thwart terrorism in West Africa. That project draws on shared values among different groups in northern Ghana to keep terrorist factions out of the regions. Now I want to share just a few examples of our community-engaged scholarship and service and the impact of this work. And this was mentioned by Michelle. Coppin State's $4 million grant from the Department of Commerce is going to help close the digital divide in West Baltimore, where close to 1/3 of households don't have a computer and half don't have high-speed internet. So this project is going to bring more Marylanders into the digital economy. I was there. It was a great day, Provost Wilkes. Thank you and congratulations. The Robert Wood Johnson Foundation has awarded over $2 million to College Park. They are leading an initiative to address the effects of environmental racism. The Mid-Atlantic Climate Action Hub will target money, training, policy action to vulnerable communities disproportionately harmed by climate-induced hazards. UMB is teaming with the T. Rowe Price Foundation on an incubator that connects nonprofits to foundation dollars until they're large enough to branch out on their own. And if our concept of community is capacious, indeed global, then I'll mention here that UMGC is now offering online and in-person education to service members near Ukraine. Staff spent this fall mobilizing to meet military learners where they are and offer programs like language and culture classes that support NATO's efforts to fortify Ukrainian resistance. Thank you, President Fowler. Now, as I promised, I'll end with just a few words about my colleague and friend, Dr. Joe Baughman. I'll be brief because it's more important that you hear from Joe than from me. Gratefully, it's not my only opportunity to share what she means to the USM, which is, in short, everything. Her name is virtually synonymous with the systems. And because Joe is such a kind and supportive colleague, you might forget that she's also a trailblazing scientist, a gifted administrator, a policy wonk, a logistics czar. I could go on. But I imagine our students will remember her primarily as an ally, an advocate, a lifeline. Joe understands how vital it is that we have student representation on this board. But she was concerned that the considerable hours this board requires might prevent many students from applying, especially those who have to hold on a job to pay for school. That constraint would limit not only the size of the applicant pool for the student regent positions, but its diversity too. And so Joe, working with the USM Foundation, established and she funded an endowment for our first-year student regents. The Student Voice Legacy Trust will serve as a tribute to Joe's passionate commitment, not only to student leadership, but to the imperative that our student leaders reflect the full diversity of the classmates they represent, so that their voices are never silenced, always at the table. True to form, Joe has not only established and funded this trust, she's also been testifying on its behalf in Annapolis. We trust the bill enabling this is going to sail through the General Assembly, because anyone who knows Joe, and everyone knows Joe, understands that this endowment is the legacy befitting a leader of her brilliance, her stature, her character. And so in this venue, Board of Regents meeting, where she's done so much good, could we give Dr. Joanne Boffman one last round of applause.
It's been an incredible ride the last decade, and thank you, Chancellor Perman, friends, and colleagues. I've had the opportunity to work with 3 chancellors, 29 presidents, 26 vice presidents for student affairs, and 38 provosts in my decade here, and lots of regents and dozens of student leaders. As I had the pleasure of the mantle of Chief Academic Officer of the USM, our institutions have granted 405,173 degrees. We make an impact. I started with goals of enhancing support to students to increase their success, while supporting the faculty to keep the quality of the educational programs at peak performance. My other aspiration was to build trust among the campus provosts, BPSAs, and affinity groups, as well as the student leaders, making this a tighter woven system. I've had a couple of drop the mic moments. The first, after 17 years of working on the issues, I sat in the back of a ballroom at Bowie State University and watched the governor sign HB1, SB1 into law. The result was less than perfect, but after all the depositions, negotiations, documentation, the mediations, it was a win. And watching our HBCUs not only utilize that new funding, but to shine a light on those HBCUs has been an incredible pleasure. Secondly, after more than 18 months, a trying 18 months, of intense work to keep our communities safe from COVID, in the fall of 21, I saw our institutions welcome back tens of thousands of students to some of the safest places anywhere. We built an incredible collaboration among our campuses, and it affirmed our great efforts in being a system. I've left some bookmarks at your place, and that say, never forget you make a difference, and every one of you does make a difference. I'm a visual learner, always have been, and the visual I've had for our students is represented by the elastic cord at the top of these bookmarks. Let us not just make a safety net for our students, made up of academic supports and wraparound services to help them prepare for life, but let us make it a tightly woven net of elastic so that it serves, in fact, as a trampoline. But mostly, as it says on the bookmark, I want to thank all of you for this incredible opportunity. I know that the students of Maryland are in very good hands. Thank you.
Well, Joe, thank you for the inspirational bookmark and for all that you've done over the years. And as everyone on the Board of Regents knows, when you need to know where to go, what to do, or who to talk to, you always turn to Joe. And no matter what time of day or night, she will answer. You will be missed. Yes. Thank you. We'll now start with our committee reports, and our first report is Student Council. Mr. Siddiqui.
Good morning, Chair Gooden.
Good morning.
Board of Regents, Chancellor Perman, and esteemed colleagues. But before I begin, I want to take a very quick moment to thank Dr. Anthony Damian for dinner last night and for hosting us here at the University of Shady Grove. It's been a beautiful, it was a beautiful dinner and a beautiful event Thank you so much for that. In January, the USMSC officially started accepting applications for the first ever Board of Regents Student Excellence Scholarship. We're several weeks behind schedule, and I was afraid we wouldn't receive enough applications. But just in a little over 2 weeks, we have received over 160 applications from students across the university system and are anticipating over 200 applications in total by the time we stop accepting applications. So the VP of Student Affairs, your teams, the USMSC representatives, thank you for helping us to get the word out and making this such a great success. This month, the USMSC executive team and I had the opportunity to meet with our new Vice Chancellor of Academic Affairs and Student Success, Dr. Allison Rinn. We had a wonderful time getting to know her and discussing the projects and initiatives the USMSC are working on this year, and we are super excited to be working with her. Once again, Dr. Allison Rinn, welcome to the USM family. I, along with Chair Brewer and Chair Patricio, had a chance to have a very productive meeting with President Aminta Bro. One of the ideas that we both shared was the importance of innovation and entrepreneurship in higher education. Innovation and entrepreneurship, I believe, and I hope you all would agree, is essential for creating a prosperous and successful campus environment. It's almost impossible to mention the words higher education without innovation following closely behind. Despite the cliches, innovation in higher education isn't just about staying ahead. It's about staying relevant and sustainable in a globally unpredictable environment. It's also not about simply disrupting the teaching and learning methodologies, but also strategically molding these methodologies in order to cultivate new ideas, enhance creativity, encourage collaboration, and promote inclusion and diversity. So with the standards of higher education getting higher and higher, there is an imperative need for institutions to think outside of the box and tap into their innovative mindsets. And thankfully, many of our universities, thanks to the leadership of our presidents, are working really hard to create that environment of innovation and entrepreneurship for our students. But adding to that, I believe that there is a lot of benefit working together as a system and helping to take those ideas just from an ideation to commercialization, supporting our students in IP, patent filing, sharing resources like 3D printers, prototyping labs, and more, as well as through creating startup incubators and accelerator programs and so much more. Chair Brewer and Chair Patricio and myself were also able to meet with Eric Blutke, who leads the legislative office for Governor Westmore, and I had the opportunity to discuss this further with him among other legislative priorities shared by CUS and CUSIF. Advocacy Day was this past Wednesday, and I want to take this opportunity to thank Roy Proiti, I'm probably pronouncing his last name wrong, from CUS, Megna, our Director of Government Affairs from the USMSC, David Gray from CUSIF, as well as Chair Brewer and Chair Patricio for helping to organize this. It was the first time in several years that the Advocacy Day was arranged in person, and certainly my first time, and I think it was a good success. We had many meetings with several key delegates and senators, and were able to advocate on behalf of the great USM. Now, before I stop blabbering, I want to take a moment again to thank someone that's very near and dear to our hearts. As Dr. Perman mentioned, she is really the backbone of our USM, of the system, and has been instrumental to the university system of Maryland. You've been our ally, you've been our friend, and someone who went out of her way to fight for our students. And the presidents who were here during COVID, I'm sure, know how integral she was in during a very tumultuous time. So, Dr. Joe Baughman, on behalf of the USMSC and the USM, thank you so much. And we'll definitely miss you. With that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Our next report, the Council of University System Faculty by Dr. Brewer.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Chair Gooden, Chancellor Perman, and Board of Regents. I'm happy to be here. We've been really busy over the past couple of months. I think actually the longer space in between the meetings, there's more to cover. But I wanted to highlight a few items from the report that I gave in written form. And the first thing I want to highlight is an especially productive meeting we had, the executive committee had with Chancellor Perman on January 20th. We discussed priorities for the year, and in two crucial areas, which Chancellor Perman responded to. He suggested task forces that might come up with recommendations. The first potential task force would be on how higher education can work more closely with K through 12 to both train teachers and on teacher retention. And the second would be on the topic of mental health, which has been, as everybody knows, kind of a crisis across the system on different levels. And these two would be in addition to the task force we've already discussed on faculty workload, tenure, and status, and changes over the past decade. And I have to say, I'm going to pause for a minute. I think those kinds of task force can be incredibly helpful in facilitating conversations across categories between administrators, between different councils, in terms of gathering information and making recommendations. And I also wanted to point, on the same day, I helped to organize a presentation about open access for the Chancellor, which I think went really well. It was super helpful in explaining a lot of the issues surrounding it. Right now, as you've heard me talk about a couple times, so much of what academics produce, that is scholars at the University of Maryland produce, but also across the United States and around the world, is hidden behind paywalls, so the public cannot access it. And this is a problem actually for support for higher education, because people can't read it. They don't even know what we're doing. But it's also a problem because there's been a lot of profiteering by presses, publishers, particularly firms like Elsevier, and it's costing our libraries huge amounts of money. And there's an effort across the United States, and in fact the United Nations was talking about it just 2 days ago, to try to address this real crisis of information. And the Chancellor was very supportive and asked for some recommendations, which again I think should come from across different categories of councils. But I was also able to talk with Eric Ludke about it. As Arsalan just mentioned, we met with him on Wednesday, and who's the Chief of Staff for Legislative Affairs for Governor Wes Moore, and who's also in charge of higher education policy for him. And he was supportive of creating possibly, I mean, who knows, this is just a beginning conversation, but possibly a comparison fund like the Innovation Fund that could provide seed money to support more open access publication. And he said if we wanted to do that, to start talking to him in April about making plans for the following legislative year. I'm not going to go through all of this, but I do want to comment on a few more highlights. Also, something I didn't mention as explicitly as I might have, we've been talking with President Brew and about shared governance surveys and expanding input into them. Right now, they've been mostly filled out by just the 12 heads of the Senate at each campus. But we would like to work more broadly to get more input about shared governance, and we need help, if we do, in distributing these surveys. Advocacy Day, I thought went really well. It was really fun working with the chairs of the other councils, and I think there's no question that the USM budget is going to get a lot of support. I'm not going to go through all the committee progress, but our committees have been very busy. But I did want to mention in particular that one of the things that I've heard a lot about this year, because I pay attention to all the emails that are written to me, all the concerns that are raised, is so many of them related to research. but we didn't have a research committee. And then I went back and I looked at our constitution, and it said we were supposed to have one. So I restarted a research committee on the faculty senate and the council, and immediately 6 people signed up. And I'm now putting them in touch with our vice chancellor for research, and I think we're going to get some good recommendations coming out of that, not only in terms of policy, but in terms of new initiatives. And finally, I do want to also thank Joe Bachman and to say what a pleasure it has been to work with you this year. And I know I speak for all members of my council when I say so. We have really relied on her wisdom more than once. Thank you for listening.
Any questions for Dr. Brewer? Seeing none, thank you for your report, Dr. Brewer. Now we'll have the report from the university system staff by Dr. Patricio.
Hello, everyone. Chair Gooden, Chancellor Perman, Board of Regents members, and university presidents, thank you for being here today, and thank you for Shady Grove for your wonderful hospitality. I apologize in advance for my slightly longer remarks today, but there's some important things I would like to address. So my first update for you is pretty straightforward. The opportunity for campuses to submit Board of Regents staff awards packets is now closed. I know that these packets require a great deal of effort and attention, and I want to thank everyone for their efforts to make this nomination process a success. We received a total of 32 exempt nominations and 5 non-exempt nominations. The 5 non-exempt nominations come from 2 institutions, Salisbury and College Park. Thank you in particular for these. All institutions have contributed to the exempt nominations with the exception of 2 campuses from whom we did not receive any packets. We will now move into the period of packet review, and with luck and some hard work, I hope to present our suggested recipients at the April board meeting. My second update is a little more complicated. So I've spent the past few days trying to put into words my feelings on this year's Advocacy Day, which occurred last Wednesday. For the uninitiated, Advocacy Day is when shared governance bodies spend a day in Annapolis lobbying our legislators for support of the USM. We talk about the good work we do, urge them to pass the governor's budget, assuming we like it, and talk about the pressing issues of the time. This year, my first year as chair of the Council of University System Staff, I experienced Advocacy Day differently than I have in past years. As you may know, it is my job as chair to listen to what staff are saying, understand or investigate the underlying causes of their issues, and advocate for a resolution. Advocacy Day this year allowed me to connect the dots on some concerns staff have been expressing and the ways in which these concerns are manifesting. A perfect example of this insight I experienced this year is with the introduction of Senate Bill 298 or House Bill 138. This bill would grant collective bargaining rights to non-bargaining managerial staff. There's a similar bill regarding faculty and graduate assistant bargaining rights. While CUS does not have a firm position on these bills at this time, these bills are in part the result of something that I have long been concerned about. Shared governance is struggling. It is not alive and well on many of our campuses. On at least one campus, funding has been cut or no longer exists for shared governance programs, including funds to travel to in-person shared governance meetings. On at least one other, and I suspect more, university presidents rarely engage with shared governance leaders or only meet with the student and or faculty committees, but not staff committees. Several campuses overrule or ignore the advice or suggestions of advisory bodies without explanation or discussion, as if these bodies did not spend hours or even days in thoughtful consideration of the issues they are presented. Staff on other campuses are afraid to speak up about their concerns for fear of retaliation from campus and impeding their professional advancement. And yet, even if shared governance were alive and thriving on all of our campuses, shared governance is advisory at best, as Dr. Brewer reminded us during our first meeting of the year. I spent some time yesterday reading through the laws that establish the USM and Board of Regents system we operate in. Structurally, because our system is advisory, we are not set up to provide feedback or meaningful influence on a variety of issues that greatly influence our staff. For example, the 1997 law establishing the USM says that the Board of Regents shall establish general standards and guidelines governing the appointment, compensation, advancement, tenure, and termination of all faculty and administrative personnel in the USM. As someone who you might say is heavily involved in shared governance, I feel it allows us to understand how to influence these processes on my own, especially not being involved in things like closed meeting sessions where a lot of meaningful discussions are had. And I think that feeling of helplessness is even worse on our individual campuses. We can debate the merits of being advisory versus having more power to vote and contribute, but regardless of how we think shared governance should operate, the issue still remains that part of the desire to unionize by many of the faculty, staff, and students stems from a feeling of helplessness and a lack of meaningful power to share in the governance of our campuses, never mind power to influence what happens at the level of the USM. They feel they have little agency over their working conditions and limited avenues to offer feedback that will be considered and acted upon, especially without repercussions for speaking up. This tells me something isn't working. Now, don't get me wrong, working in the USM is a privilege. I honestly feel that. And there are so many positive aspects of being a staff member in the system. I have personally felt welcomed by all USM staff, have felt the appreciation Chancellor Perman has for shared governance, and have never found a door closed to me in terms of trying to make progress directly with USM staff on an issue that I hear from the broader staff population. But as I mentioned before, this year's Advocacy Day helped me connect the dots on some of the issues staff have been voicing, and I felt it was important to share it with you. I share this perspective purely in hopes that you will look at these bills to unionize not purely as a problem to be squashed, but as a manifestation of the underlying issues our staff, faculty, and students are experiencing. I don't know the perfect solution to these concerns, and to say that our leaders have competing priorities is an understatement. But I have shared this with you perhaps with a small hope that we begin to make efforts to improve the experience of our faculty, staff, and students who feel unheard in a variety of ways, including through rehabilitating the health of shared governance on our respective campuses. This leads me to my final yet related note. The annual CUS Shared Governance Survey has been sent out to respective campuses for those involved in shared governance committees and staff to offer feedback about the state of shared governance on their campus. The caution I would give about this survey is that it goes to those staff who are active on shared governance on our campus because of our limited distribution capabilities and does not represent the voice of campus in general about their broader satisfaction with shared governance. CUS would be willing to engage in a process that would better assess the issue of shared governance on our campuses, but we at the very least encourage you to take a look at this topic closer on your respective campuses and at the USM level. Thank you for your time today. I know this was longer and a bit ranty, but I do want to say I echo all the sentiments that have been shared about our dear Joe. You, your spirit, your kindness, your wisdom will be truly missed. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Dr. Patricio? Well, hearing none, thank you for that comprehensive report. And we'll now move on to the Council of University System Presidents, Dr. Bruh.
Thank you, and good morning. Good morning, Chair Gooden, Chancellor Perman, to the Board of Regents, to my colleagues and everyone gathered here today. And I also would like to add my thanks to our host, Dr. Ann Kademian, and to everyone at the Universities of Shady Grove for a wonderful, wonderful evening last night, but also for the amazing presentations this morning. I don't know if Audrey is still in the room, but I just want her to know that her remarks were truly awe-inspiring. I could see all the heads shaking around here, and you know, how heartwarming it was. So please, Dr. Kademian, pass along our thanks to her and to let her know how inspiring she was this morning. We thank her for sharing her story about her family's history and reminding us all that African American history is American history. And it was really, truly remarkable. Thank you. I must also offer my congratulations and thanks on behalf of the Council of University System of Presidents and our deepest heartfelt appreciation and best wishes to Dr. Jo Boffman. Her expertise and commitment to education policy and to student success has made her an invaluable resource and advisor, providing insights, strong leadership, sound counsel, and support to numerous senior academic officers, chief student affairs officers, as well as the numerous presidents, I didn't know how many there were, but numerous presidents and members of the Council of University System of Presidents, so including myself. And so we are deeply indebted to you for all that you have done. And I'll ask that my colleagues, would you please stand at this time so we may recognize Dr. Baldwin and applaud. It's an understatement to say you will be missed. Thank you so very much. The Council of University System of Presidents last met on January 9th. The January meeting was focused on two topics. Senior Vice Chancellor Herbst discussed the implementation process for the system strategic plan, and she also provided an overview of the process results of the institutional survey and next steps for implementation. Next, Vice Chancellor McDonough, along with Regent Jeff Ganella, who chairs the Strategic Communications Work Group, led a discussion about the USM branding initiative. And they were joined by Vince Cald and Beth Bloom from BVK advertising firm. We gave input, and we look forward to continuing efforts on the branding initiative. Those consultants also received feedback from the presidents on their perceptions of the USM and its brand and the relationship between system campuses and their hopes for the initiative moving forward. Our meeting will next take place on March 6th, and so I look forward to giving you further updates at that time. And as I conclude, it was mentioned earlier that Dr. Goodwin, Peter Goodwin, will be leaving us. I know we'll have many more opportunities to say thank you, but I also want to recognize him at this time for all his contributions and the way he's led his institution. We thank you so much, and there's more to come from CUS, but thank you. Can we just give him a round of applause? That concludes my remarks for this morning, and happy Black History Month. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll move on to public comment. Ms. Wilkerson will moderate the public session. Ms. Wilkerson?
Good morning. In accordance with the guidelines for public comment, which are posted on the USM website, the agenda includes time set aside for this purpose, and each recognized speaker has 3 minutes to address the board. Requests for public comments should be submitted 48 hours before the meeting, and comments should pertain to an item on the agenda. There is one speaker today. Our first speaker is Mr. Warren Pointer with AFSCME. He's requested to comment on the operating budget. I would like to remind our speaker and those in the room, as well as those viewing the live stream, that the public comment period is a time for the board to listen to comments made by the public, and the board will not respond to comments at this time. As needed, any follow-up to questions or comments will be provided following the meeting. Mr. Pointer?
Good morning. My name is Warren Pointer, and I've worked at the University of Maryland College Park for the past 20 years. I'm a proud member of AFSCME Local 1072. First, we want you to know that we are watching your actions and inactions. Despite being the public university system of Maryland, we continue to see tens of millions of dollars in private sector private sector contracts at your affiliates. We aren't talking new construction, we are talking food service, housekeeping, maintenance, IT, and more. With little transparencies, administrators have been selling off more and more of the university's operation. Second, you all continue to employ an underclass of employees, contingent employees, in the thousands. These employees lack basic employment rights and generally cost less, as they are not on state insurance or get any contributions to a retirement. Both these private sector contracts and contingent employment degrades the USM and exploits the very people you rely on to operate the system. It also contradicts many of the values of human rights and progressivism espoused in your recently passed strategic plan. We have been meeting with representatives from the system in an attempt to hammer out a new master agreement with USM. Though we have been grinding out very small progress, we still have a large gulf between both sides. It remains disappointing that no one in leadership from the system, not the Chancellor or anyone of you Regents, has attended any bargaining. As the ultimate voice of the system, the body who will ultimately sign off on any agreement now or in the future, it's odd that you don't join us for bargaining. We again extend an invitation for you to attend and participate so we can get things done for the betterment of the entire system and our communities. Lastly, we are in solidarity with fellow workers seeking to unionize. We can't believe that elements of the system are still actively fighting workers who want a collective voice. I hope you can come to your senses and stop fighting with your own workers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pointer. There aren't any more comments or public comment.
Okay, well, I want to thank Mr. Pointer, who took the time to share his thoughts with the board. We certainly appreciate your input. Now we'll move on to the consent agenda. Discussions regarding which items to include on the consent agenda were made by me and the committee chairs. However, any region may request that an item be removed from the consent agenda for separate review and discussion. Before I move approval of the consent agenda, I ask if there are any items that any region would like removed from the consent agenda for separate review and discussion.
No.
Hearing none, I move approval of all the consent agenda items. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Our next order of business are the committee reports. First, from the Committee on Education Policy and Student Life. Regent Smerick and Dr. Darlene Smith will provide a brief update on the periodic program reviews. Then Regent Atman will introduce the operating budget update from the Committee on Finance. Finally, Regent Ganella will give us an update on the implementation of the strategic plan. So let's begin with Regent Smerick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just a brief background here. During the January meeting of our committee, the Committee on Education Policy and Student Life, Dr. Darlene Smith, USM Special Assistant to the Senior Vice Chancellor for Academic and Student Affairs, presented the annual results of periodic review. These are the 7-year reviews of academic programs report. We as a committee realize that most people here are aware of EPSL's approval of academic programs, but we thought it was important to also share this part of the process with you because this 7-year report, review of academic programs, is where academic quality and viability and productive use of resources are measured. This is where the institution's plans to establish viable degrees have been successful or where we see administrators recognize that a program may no longer be needed. So we decided that it might be helpful if we just walk through, or have Dr. Smith walk through this process so we can all be aware of, we as an institution are not just engaged in the approval of programs, but the review to make sure that they represent the best use of time and, or the best interest of faculty, staff, and students. So thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure being with all of you this morning. We were delighted, and I say we. Today I am the voice of faculty and academic leadership in our wonderful institutions. So we were glad that this was taken off the consent agenda because we often know that at the EPSL is when the new programs are introduced. And it's the beginning of new ways to meet workforce needs, demand, and the region's needs. But that's just the beginning of the life cycle of new programs. Because once these programs are approved at the EPSL and here at the Board of Regents, almost the real work begins in terms of growing enrollments, growing faculty resources to meet the continuing needs, and the continuous strengthening and improvement of these programs over time as needs change. And so, And so what is the periodic review of academic programs? It's purposeful, systematic, very formal to monitor the academic quality and to ensure the productive use of resources. In 2003, the Board of Regents delegated to the Chancellor approval of these various institutional reports on the review of existing academic programs. And this review follows a very standardized process, which was also approved by the Regents. Each year, this report is presented to the Education Policy and Student Life Committee as an information item. And as I said, this year, it was taken off the consent agenda. So what is the process for a periodic review of programs? Every program, after it's been approved, is reviewed every 7 years. It is a thorough process. It engages all of the faculty of a program. And I want to briefly highlight that process so that you understand the quality of the review process and how serious it is taken by our faculty, by our program directors, by our deans, by our provosts, and by our presidents. It starts with an internal self-study where departmental faculty review their program and make recommendations. It's followed by a comprehensive external review by peers to look at the program and also to make recommendations. This internal and the external reviews are then developed into a report summarizing the findings and developing an action plan for continuous improvement. This initial report is reviewed by the dean of the respective college, by the provost, and by the president. And then when it's approved at the senior leadership stage, it is then presented to the University System of Maryland for our review, feedback, and approval. This year, there were 150 programs reviewed. This is a 15% increase over the number of programs reviewed last year. The number of programs reviewed fluctuates from year to year depending on alignment with accreditation reviews, when the program came into play, and a variety of other factors. About half of the programs were reviewed this year were at the bachelor level. The remaining half were at the master's and doctoral level with some certificates. To the extent possible, we always try to align these review of programs with accreditation reviews, and the accreditation reviews serve as that external review. This year, 34 or 23% of the programs that were reviewed were part of discipline-specific accreditation reviews. Now, I mentioned that there's a comprehensive report that's developed. These program action plans are taken very seriously by the campus because they identify not only opportunities for continuous improvement, but very specific tactical issues that will be addressed over the years to come. And these plans can vary anywhere from redesigning a curriculum, introducing a new area of concentration, perhaps establishing dual degree and accelerated partners pathways either within the campus or across USM campuses. Hiring new faculty if there's been a realization of the need to broaden the expertise in an emerging subject matter. Enhancing marketing recruitment efforts, perhaps greater collaboration with employers and partners in the community, offering more scholarships and financial aid to particular sectors. And sometimes the recommendation includes suspending or discontinuing a program. It's important to note that a suspension or discontinuation of a program is not a failure. It is part of the natural life cycle of any product, of any program. And I want to briefly highlight what may lead to a suspension or a discontinuation, and then to give you a broader summary of programs that have been discontinued and suspended and why. Because there's some good news here. Behind every innovation, there may be lessons learned that we move from there. So, as part of these periodic review of programs, every program is looked to establish whether it might be classified as a low productivity program. Low productivity pertains to or is defined as the number of degrees awarded. So at a bachelor's level, including undergraduate certificates, low productivity, there would be less than 5 degrees awarded in the most recent year or less than 15 in the last 3. At the master's level, less than 2 in the most recent year or less than 6 in the last 3. At the doctoral level, less than 1 in the most recent year or 3 in the last 3 years. This year, the number of low productivity programs was 16, or about 10.5% of the total number of programs reviewed. By the way, this number is relatively consistent. The year before, it was a little bit less than 11%. When a program is identified as low productivity, their action plan is more detailed. Timeline for executing that action plan is more specific, and there is a very strong narrative and discussion with the leadership at each institution to monitor those action plans to ensure implementation and assessment of results based on those plans, and then if need be, refinement of those plans to ensure greater impact. Now, suspended and discontinued programs. In looking at low productivity reports this year, we actually only had 2 programs that had been suspended or discontinued as part of the review cycle. Now, these numbers up here identify the total number of suspended and discontinued programs in a given academic year. So last year we had 15, this year we had 10 to date. But in this periodic review of programs, we only had 2. And I want to explain that, is that our faculty do not wait until the 7th year to assess whether a program is meeting its goals or not. And just because a program is suspended doesn't mean that the content, the subject matter, is being suspended. Let me give you an example. There's a program where very strong enrollments, but the program took 2 different paths and was serving 2 different workforce needs as it has been in establishment. So what this program did is suspend the original program and develop 2 new programs. Another university, there was a program that was struggling, and the content subject matter was added to a new program, which made the newer program more robust in terms of meeting needs. So yes, sometimes programs are suspended or discontinued because the market has moved on and it is time to exit that program. But many times, suspensions and discontinuations is the ebb and flow and the mergers of different programs to meet needs. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. And I think it was particularly this topic at the EPSL with low productivity programs and suspensions and discontinuations that we thought would be a good idea to share it with the board to have a better understanding of the quality of the review process for our academic programs. I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions on this? I know many of you think that we only add programs, but we also review and sunset programs. And so both are going on. And so I appreciate the detailed explanation on how that process occurs.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Can I just ask, I'm sorry, Smith, can I ask just one question for clarification? So just broadly, we could think about two different programs being low productivity. One, the market has changed and different things have developed, and it's just part of the life cycle that this program goes away. You could imagine a different example where something we all still agree is important, and I'm just making something up here, American history, the study of the classics, things in the humanities, where the board, faculty still think it's important, but for a whole host of other reasons, it's now low productivity. Fewer students are going into it. So it's just graduating fewer students. So how do you think about maybe engaging earlier to say in the first category, natural life cycle, this needs to be phased out, something else can take its place. But in the other category, this is still important, it's low productivity, maybe we need to get involved to make sure that this thing survives.
A quick answer is that our campuses are very innovative and creative in keeping important content in their portfolio. And so that one program that's low enrolled may become an area of concentration in a broader program. And they identify the courses in that sunsetted program that has high enrollment and is meeting a variety of needs, and they'll move that into an area of concentration. On the one slide, I said that we excluded areas of concentration. To see the number of new concentrations and the suspensions of area of concentrations, that's where the creativity lies. Often new areas of concentrations are established because you have a low enrolled program and you want to keep that content, but you're going to move it into another program. Or you're thinking that there's high demand, but you're not ready to create a new program, so you'll put it in an area of concentration, and as it bubbles up in terms of growth, it'll become its own program. And so areas of concentrations can be very, very fluid in our programs because they're almost the testing grounds for what's new and emerging and relevant and how that changes over time.
That's helpful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you. And now Regent Atman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a short update on some budget matters. As we all know, this is the time of the year when the legislature is in session. We also all know that we have a new administration, the Moore administration, and they have submitted their first budget bill to the legislature. The legislature will act on that bill, and it will be ultimately approved by both houses and then signed by the governor after the session ends, probably in April. Preliminarily, the budget indicates that this governor has great support for higher education, believes in higher education. We thank the governor. At this point, imagine our budget last year was around $6.7 billion. The governor's proposal for this year is $2.1 billion of state funding through a combination of general fund and higher education investment fund for the USM. This indicates, and I'm very pleased to report, indicates an increase in state funding of $204.6 million, represents a 10.8% increase over FY23 appropriations. The governor's budget provides most of that increase, of course, goes to the folks who work in the system. 4.5% would be a COLA for state-supported positions. That's $102 million. Then there are fringe benefit adjustments related to that. $36 million is an increase for HBCU institutions resulting from HB1, the legal settlement, which is paid out over 10 years. Turning to tuition, the governor's budget assumes that we will have no more than a 2% increase in resident undergraduate tuition, and no more than a 5% increase for non-resident undergraduate students. Now, this is the governor's assumption. Ultimately, it's our responsibility to agree on what the tuition levels are, and we will look at that in June of this year. Again, the state budget is not final. We are in discussions with the administration about other things that we might want to have included in there. But I would say at this point, we're very pleased with the support we're getting from the administration. This is just an information item. That's the end of my report, unless the chancellor or anyone else would like to say anything. Okay, thank you.
Any questions for Regent Atman? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move on to the strategic plan. Regent Ganella.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning. As I hope everyone here will recall, the board approved the USM's new 10-year strategic plan, Vision 2030, from excellence to preeminence last June. That vote was a culmination of a comprehensive 18-month strategic planning process that had sought out input from all corners of the state, including not just our institutional leadership, but our alumni, students, staff, faculty, foundation advisory boards, as well as the Office of the Governor, leadership of the General Assembly, the Maryland State Department of Education, MHEC, our state representatives, business, technology, and industry councils. At that June meeting, the board essentially said, great job, thanks, we approved the plan. But there is another important step, critical step that must be taken. You need to come up with a way to implement that plan. You need to come up with an operational framework that will allow this 30-plus page document that you all have seen to become a living, breathing strategic plan. So since July of last year, the Strategic Plan Work Group has worked with the Chancellor and senior leadership in the system office, the presidents, the executive directors of the regional centers, and a team of consultants from Huron and their national education, higher education management practice to try to execute that directive, to lay out in detail the process by which the USM and the institutions will go about achieving the ambitious vision and the goals that were set out in that 10-year plan. As you will hear in more detail in a minute from Ellen, the implementation plan contains all the elements that you would expect in such a document: a management and oversight structure, a system for reporting and accountability, a set of proposed strategies, next steps, and a timeline for addressing the goals, and even an assessment of the resources needed to achieve success. But I'd also like to point out two important aspects of the implementation plan that the work group insisted be addressed. The first is the need for accountability, including a commitment to the inclusion of key performance indicators wherever possible. And second, a recognition that however much good work has gone into the implementation planning process, it is not finished. Additional work will always be needed, and to be successful, the implementation plan must be flexible and even provide for further refinement, planning, and adaptation. So with those comments and that background, I'm going to turn the floor over to the ever-present Ellen Hurst for additional comments and discussion before asking for the board's approval.
Thank you, Regent Ganella. So we have the tenacious Ann Kadamian and the ever-present Ellen Hurst.
Just wanted to see if anyone was paying attention.
I want to thank Regent Ganella and the regents who have served so faithfully on the Strategic Plan Work Group. They put in an awful lot of hours. And while we on staff get paid for those hours, they do not. So thank you very much. The guidance has been invaluable. I'm just going to hit some highlights of features of the implementation plan. The Chancellor and Chair made it quite clear to me that I was not allowed to wonk out like I usually do. So this will be short. First of all, you have a link to the plan. It was part of a larger report, and it's on the USM website as part of the strategic plan materials. And we invite everyone, the board, presidents, everyone listening, to provide feedback to us. And that's one of the things I want to emphasize. A strategic plan is a living document if it's done well, which means it can be subject to updating as circumstances demand, as will the plan. I want to start, and if we could project, there we go, next slide, please. So these slides are just designed to keep me on track for the few minutes I have, I assure you. Regent Ganella mentioned accountability and management. So we have put together, I think, a much more formal, structured process to do that this time around, where we have identified people on Jay's staff who are responsible for each of the areas. Now, everyone knows that those on Jay's staff don't actually do the work. So beneath that level of a senior leader, here called the priority champion, we actually have goal managers named that are, again, specifically responsible within the system office for ensuring progress on each of the strategic goal areas. And I will point out, as I have previously, the Chancellor himself has insisted he is the goal champion for the diversity, equity, and inclusion frame and goal pillar, signaling how very important that is in the strategic plan. But we all know that the actual work of this strategic plan will be done at the universities. So a very vital part of this was the presidents designating, each president designated a strategic plan liaison who have all been very busy in helping put together this plan. And I want to thank the presidents because they named people who could really represent them in their cabinets. This wasn't delegated down to some staff level who couldn't speak on behalf of the president and cabinet. So we appreciate that. They named people who have full-time jobs, but yet they've made time for this important work. Okay. Next slide, please. So in order to get at the how do we know when we're successful, we asked ourselves, with the help of Huron, this series of questions. And as a result of this series of questions, which we shared with the institutional liaisons, can you go to the next slide, please? For each priority area, we have pages and pages and pages that look like this. And this is the frame that will take us through progress and how we will measure progress on each area. And I would say the result of this exercise, which is included in the appendix of the implementation plan, is probably resulted in the most comprehensive set of KPIs and process steps developed in any USM strategic plan. Now, I've only been here for 5 years, but Anthony Foster, who I should thank first and foremost, who's been the architect of this whole thing, has been the leader of the strategic planning process for 20-some years. And he's the one that's saying this is the most comprehensive set of KPIs we've ever developed. Now, to give you an example, this is just but one page and one example. We've already developed with the institutions, importantly, 20 short-term or mid-term strategic plan goals. We're working on 14 more. And then we have a work plan for addressing 17 more goals over the next 3 to 5 years. And I want to remind everybody, this is a 10-year plan. So I think that's pretty good progress. Now, when you step back from all of that progress in terms of identifying these goals, it's formidable. And it's a lot. And so I want to point out a couple of considerations. First, and speaking frankly, and this is where the Regents played an enormous role, the framework represents our system staff response to the Regents who challenged us to provide more detail on how we expect to accomplish all this. So by definition, this is a roadmap of all the homework we have to do over the next 10 years. We recognize there has to be a prioritization process, and there will be a prioritization of metrics. But I also want to point out that the short-term goals should look very familiar. And this is a recognition that as a system, we have to keep doing what we're doing it ever better in an ever more challenging environment, but we know how to measure what we do today. And so we will continue to do this. This is not an either or, this is an and. The and are the mid and longer term goals around changing the way we do things, changing the way we offer what we do, and the way in which we do it. So there will be a prioritization. That's work still in progress. And to speak to that, could we go to the next slide, please? Okay, this is, I wanted to show you an example. All those KPIs were making even us get a little blurry vision. So we created this summary just of some of the key academic goals. I would commend to you this chart, if no other, to start to understand how we're tracking things. Now, I mentioned both the longer-term goals and the need to prioritize. A lot of this work can be handled internally within the USMO, but in addition, we envision this second and more critical line of next step activity, which involves bringing together cross-institutional work groups charged with identifying some of the longer-term issues in the plan. Topics we expect to address in this way include academic innovation and the development and support of new credentialing. And we already have several universities who have said we will be a part of that for sure. Research, particularly in the areas of environmental sustainability, environmental justice, DEI, and then importantly, increasing enrollment across the system. And I'm very happy to say that we already have both a Regents work group and a university system-wide work group on enrollment and enrollment management that meets regularly, and the Chancellor meets regularly with presidents on this. So we'll continue that work. Part of what we did is we also want to honor the fact that the universities have their own strategic plans with their own priorities. And an important step we took was to ask the universities to prioritize within the system strategic plan what were the top most critical areas that met their needs. And we were able to do that. I'm happy to report there was great consensus on some of the main themes, but we will use that as we go forward to help populate the work groups for those universities that have indicated things that were their top priorities. I was told I had 5 minutes, so I'm going to stop there. But happy to answer any questions either today or as you get a chance to look through the implementation plan. If the detailed questions occur to you, please don't hesitate to contact me.
Bob.
This is an amazing job. It really is an outstanding effort. In my world, I deal with municipalities, counties, and they all have comprehensive master plans. And they are these elaborate, long-range plans. The importance to me is that these plans, as they get thought out, are actually implemented and incorporated in the activities that we do. And in the world I live in, if you're going for permits and approvals, or you have to verify that it is in fact in the plan. I'd like to make sure that we have procedures and structures that as we implement things and we take on programs, that there's a checkbox that it needs to be in this plan to move forward. And that this doesn't just sit as this wonderful document of thoughts, because there's too much good work here.
Thank you.
Make it a working plan.
I will share with you, and Regent Cannell and I have talked about this. It wasn't easy developing the plan, but that was the easy part. This is a very ambitious implementation plan. And you can be assured that we will track progress against it. And we have the mechanisms already set up to do that. And we've committed to report annually on progress against all these goals through our dashboard that you all saw a couple months ago. But we also recognize, and we've already started filling in, not everywhere, but we've started filling in where we need resources to make progress at the speed we want to. And we're going to need to also be accountable to the board to let you know when we are falling behind and whether it's because of resources or other things. So we're committed to do that. I've done strategic plans for the past 20 years. I have no interest in running strategic plans that we don't execute on, nor does anybody who's been involved in this. So that's our commitment to you.
Any other questions or comments? Oh, Hugh?
Madam Chair, I would just say, I don't know what the plan is, but will we be updated on this maybe as a regular course over the next 10 years as an agenda item, I guess?
I can skip the second half of my...
I have to turn it back over to Regent Cannella now for that one.
I'll let him finish his script.
The answer is yes. And I'm going to tell you in a second exactly how.
Thank you, Regent Ellen.
Are there any other questions for Ellen? All right, well, hearing none, Madam Chair, I would like to ask the board's approval of the implementation plan, and if so authorized, I would make a motion for approval of the implementation plan of the USM's 10-year strategic plan as presented.
Well, let's answer the question first, and then we'll do the motion.
Oh,
so
okay.
that they know that there is a
well, yes. So yes. I mean, monitoring the progress under the strategic plan going forward will be done by the board through the dashboard that Ellen referenced and the other accountability measures. So the board will be reviewing this on an annual basis according to that dashboard and according to all the KPIs, and we will have an opportunity to ask questions such as, is this action included in this plan, and does it meet the requirements that were set out in the plan?
And the only other key is that it is a living document. So if for some reason we need to add or take away things because of environmental changes or whatever, then we're going to do that.
And I think it will also include the periodic reports from the other work groups that are connected to, like enrollment and others that are connected to the implementation plan. So not only will it be a review by the board according to the dashboard, but we'll also get the periodic reports from enrollment, strategic communications, and others. Am I authorized to make a motion?
I second it. I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, motion passed.
Excellent. Well, thank you. And I've just got one more minute, and then I will move on. But with that vote, I think it's important for the board to know that all the assignments given to the strategic plan work group by this board, the development of a 10-year strategic plan and a separate implementation plan have been completed. And therefore, the work group is hereby disbanded. As I mentioned, monitoring of the progress of this will happen on an annual basis through the dashboard and in the process we just discussed. But before yielding the balance of my time, I would like to end by personally expressing my appreciation to my fellow members of the work group, particularly the Regents, who spent so much time in that process. This has been a process over the last 24 months. The group has met more than a dozen times and diligently reviewed and sat through and reviewed many, many documents and presentations. And in the end, while it was time-consuming, I believe that all the hard work paid off in the strategic plan and in the implementation framework. And I truly believe that this positions the system to achieve a lot of the goals that have been set out and for tremendous success over the next 10 years and the realization of that move from excellence to preeminence. So I thank the presidents and all the individual institutions for their engagement and their commitment and their support. I definitely thank the ever-present Ellen Herbst, who led this effort so astutely and with such grace and tenacity as well. Kept us on track, but it's been a pleasure being a part of this process, and I am pleased that the work group is disbanded, and now I need the balance of my time. Thank you.
Yeah, and Catherine, I would like you to note that we did actually end a work group on schedule. Work groups, as many of you probably don't know, we have standing committees, and then we have work groups. And the goal with a work group is something that starts and ends. Sometimes they have a hard time ending. And so we're very proud that this one ended. And we want to thank Jeff for leading this activity for the past 24 months and helping keep us all in channel as we move down the path, and for all of the system staff that worked on this. Because there was a number of people pulling things together. And we've got 3 work groups that spun out of this, communications, branding, and enrollment, that will continue. as we go through the implementation phase. So thank you to everyone. I also, before we go to closed session, I'd like to thank Dr. Kardamian again for not only a great evening last night and a great dinner, but for showcasing your students, because I always like to say that's why we're here, that's why we do what we do. And certainly seeing the students, especially the student this morning, just really brought it all home for a number of us. I'd also like to thank your Board of Advisors for coming and attending and being a part of this. Joe, more to come on Wednesday, but again, thank you for all that you've done for the students, the faculty, the staff, the systems, for the Board of Regents, and for yours truly. Thank you. And congratulations to the Power 100 and to the Chancellor, and a special thanks to the bold and the brilliant Mr. Smoke. And so I love that line in the Sun, the bold and the brilliant. So
it can only go downhill.
So the Open Meetings Act permits public bodies to close their meetings to the public in circumstances outlined in 3-305 of the Act, and to carry out administrative functions exempted by 3-103 of the Act. The Board of Regents will now vote to reconvene in closed session. The agenda for the public meeting today includes a written statement with a citation of the legal authority and the reasons for closing the meeting, and a listing of the topics to be discussed. The statement has been provided to the Regents and is posted on the USM's website. Do I have a motion to close the meeting? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The meeting is closed. The closed session will be in this room, and we'll start in 15 minutes. So 11:15.
Yeah.
Okay.